The story of the battleship Yamato is one that's known to pretty much anyone who's interested in naval history. Conceived initially as a huge force multiplier for the Imperial Japanese Navy, when they realized that either by treaty or by economy they weren't going to be able to match the American battle fleet, her sheer size, firepower, and protection meant that in theory she would have been able to take on multiple battleships from the US fleet, assuming that the US was following the treaty limitations, and come out victorious. And much as her fame derives from her sheer size and firepower, she was of course only the first of multiple projected ships of this type. Her sister ship Musashi would be constructed along similar lines. The battleship Shinano was supposed to be the third of the class, although to a slightly modified design, but she was of course finished as an aircraft carrier following changes to the Imperial Japanese Navy's needs during World War II. But despite a ship of about 70,000 tons with 18.1-inch guns being quite the build effort, the Japanese thought, correctly as it turns out, that as soon as news of the ship's actual capabilities got out into the wider world, their biggest rivals, the United States and Great Britain, would probably build something to counter her. And so, although Yamato was a super battleship, she was, in theory, supposed to be surpassed within a few years by an even larger project that would be to Yamato-scale ships what Yamato herself was to 35,000-ton treaty-compliant designs. Of course, those ships weren't built either, and so only Yamato and Musashi would enter service in the form they were originally designed for. Although designed for a brutal battleship slugging match, Yamato had a fairly quiet Second World War. Despite being the flagship of the Imperial Japanese Navy, she was actually rarely deployed, and when she was, it was often in an area that didn't bring her into direct conflict with the enemy. For example, at Midway, despite being the flagship of the whole operation, she was with the invasion force far to the west, which meant that while the Kido Butai was being bombed into oblivion by aircraft from Enterprise and Yorktown, Yamato was sailing serenely quite a distance away. A combination of her sheer value in a straight-up battle and the massive fuel requirements to get her moving meant that she sat out the entire Guadalcanal campaign, although speculation as to whether or not she might have tipped the balance in some of the night battles around that island remains to this day. In the end, she would only actually see direct action against enemy surface warships once during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, although as the lead ship of Center Force after seeing her sister Musashi downed by carrier aircraft, she was, ironically enough, in the one force that wasn't going to face American battleships. The battle she was designed for, fighting against massed numbers of American standard-type ships, took place at the Battle of Surigao Strait when the Southern Force ran into Admiral Kincaid's vessels, and Admiral Halsey had taken the US fast battleships off to attack Admiral Ozawa's Northern Force. This meant that Center Force faced nothing bigger than an escort carrier, although Taffy 3 did put up one heck of a fight. After Center Force retreated from that engagement, Yamato would be sent out to face action one final time during Operation 10 Go. This was not an operation she was expected to return from. Loaded up with as much fuel as the Japanese could find, and a relatively minimal escort, her job was to charge headlong at the American landings at Okinawa, and assuming that she made it there, to beach herself as a gigantic unsinkable fortress, in the hope that this would allow the defenders of Okinawa to hold out even longer. But as it turned out, the same carrier aircraft that had done in her sister ship Musashi at the Battle of Sibuyan Sea would also come for Yamato. Swarmed by hundreds of American torpedo bombers, dive bombers, and fighters, which at this point were equipped with rockets and bombs, Yamato and her escorts put up a valiant fight, but in the end were overwhelmed, with the mighty battleship capsizing before her main magazines detonated. Now, of course, there were survivors, and those survivors over the years have at times given their account of what happened on that fateful day, and at other times, even if they chose not to be publicly interviewed, they did write letters back to their loved ones describing their experiences. So, why am I giving you a 5-minute recap of the life story of the battleship Yamato? Well, I've been asked to help out with the launch of a graphic novel. Now, some of you may be familiar with a number of other graphic novels that have been done over the past few years to try and bring naval history to a wider audience. There is, of course, The Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors, based on the book of the same name by James Hornfisher. And a year before that came The String Bags, as you can see here, by Garth Ennis and PJ Holden, with each one taking a slightly different approach. Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors, of course, having a book to directly adapt, essentially did so with just a little bit of artistic license. Whereas the String Bag sought to tell the story of several extremely famous swordfish operations through the lens of a fictional swordfish crew. So all the events that actually occurred were real, but of course, because no one swordfish crew was present for all of them, they had to come up with a, if you like, third-party stand-in through which we could see the events happening, but still with an extremely high rate of historical accuracy. And that brings us to the graphic novel that I'm going to be talking to you about today, which, shocking enough, involves Yamato. This is Yamato: The Final Letters, created by Mozuma in collaboration with World of Warships. And as you might guess from the cover, its subject is that final voyage of Yamato on Operation Tengo and the ship sinking at the hands of many American carrier aircraft. Now, while there are numerous books and articles and so forth that will tell you all about what happened to Yamato on Operation Tengo, when she was hit, how many aircraft hit her, how long it took her to go down, etc., etc., as with the other two graphic novels I mentioned, this is much more about the stories of the men who served aboard Yamato and what they experienced in those final hours. And what the team have done is, of course, consult all the historical evidence. We've got the reports and the pictures from the US carrier aircraft that carried out the attack. We have, as I mentioned, the various letters and interviews from the survivors of Yamato and some of the escorts. And then, using that information, the team have created 3 point-of-view characters aboard Yamato from strategic positions around the ship, and then via their letters back to their families, some of which, reflecting historical reality, weren't delivered for quite some time after their passing, we then get to experience not just the fate of Yamato, as told in graphic novel form, but also, to a degree, how this impacted not just the people aboard at the time, but how it also impacted those who were left behind. And for those of us in the West, you might think, but surely the Japanese Navy was the enemy. Well, yes, the Japanese Navy was the enemy, but if you look at the way World War II played out, and indeed pretty much most wars at sea, most sailors have the perspective that the ship is the enemy, the people aboard are only the enemy as long as the ship remains a threat. Once the ship is gone, people who were up until a few minutes ago doing their level best to kill each other will now turn their efforts to trying to save the other party, because for all sailors, the ultimate enemy is the sea. And so, yes, Yamato was an enemy battleship, and yes, she sailed on a mission that was aiming to bring death and destruction to Allied lives on Okinawa. And yes, she failed in that mission, and yes, it did cost a huge amount in both men and material for her to fail that mission. But this graphic novel seeks to tell not just that story, but, as I said, the story of the people who had to go out aboard Yamato, the people who sank Yamato, and the ultimate price that many of them paid to be there on that fateful day. And so, on a brighter note, how can you get your hands on this graphic novel? Well, it's being launched via a Kickstarter. Now, of course, due diligence. Being a Kickstarter, there are risks associated with it. However, the company is teamed up with World of Warships, as I said, so I'd say there's a reasonably decent chance this one will actually get produced. And unlike some Kickstarters, as you can see and as you have been seeing from some of the panels, a good chunk of this actually already exists. So what are the rewards and the costs? Well, the lowest entry is $10, which will get you the entire graphic novel in digital format, plus a bunch of extras. There's the next level up at $35, which gets you a softcover physical version, an $85 tier, which gets you a hardcover version, And obviously, as you go up the tiers, further bonus items also get added to your pledge. And then there's a couple of big captain and admiral level boxes, which, if you really want to splash the cash, you can do. And amongst other things, you get the fancy box that you've been seeing on screen at the moment, along with a whole ton of other stuff, obviously. So with all that said, if you do want to back it, there is a Kickstarter link in the video description. And again, full disclosure, if you do use that particular link, it will help the channel out a little bit at no additional cost to yourself. So hopefully you like the channel enough to use that. But of course, you can go and back it independently if you want to as well. Backing it by any means will, of course, bring the novel closer to realization. But if you want to sweeten the pot just a little bit, I will be designing a custom insert specifically for fans and subscribers of the channel who go and back it using the link below. So you'll get that little bit extra for being a Drakinifel audience member on top of all the other rewards that are already listed on the page. And of course, since I'm pretty sure some of you will have seen this campaign and backed it already, if you have done so and you are a subscriber of the channel, then you can then drop me a message and I'll coordinate something with the people who are creating it so that you don't get left out just because you happen to be one of those nice people who backed it in the first week before this video came out. So that wraps us up for this video. Nice little short one, but I thought this was a project that was well worth backing, and, well, shockingly, it is related to naval matters, so there's that as well. So I hope to see you all again in another video soon. Thanks for listening to this one, and see you again another time.